You know what's kind of crazy? We spend years in school learning how to solve problems, but almost nobody actually shows us how money works in real life. And you don't really notice that at first. It only hits later when you start earning, making decisions, and suddenly you're expected to figure everything out on your own, like spending, saving, what to prioritize, all of it. So what most people end up doing is just learning through trial and error, trying things, messing up a bit, adjusting. But without a clear system behind it, money starts to feel unpredictable. And when something feels unpredictable, it's really hard to feel in control of it. So here's the first thing that changes everything. Money isn't actually random. It only feels random when you don't see the pattern behind it. Because if you really think about it, your money already follows a cycle. It comes in, it moves somewhere, and then it either disappears or builds something. And that same cycle repeats every month. The problem is, most of us never designed that cycle. It just kind of formed on its own, based on habits. And habits don't always lead you in the best direction. Now, let's talk about income for a second, because this is where almost everyone focuses first. It feels obvious, right? If I earn more, things should get better. But what actually happens is a bit different. Income goes up, and then slowly your lifestyle adjusts with it. Nothing dramatic, just small upgrades here and there. And before you realize it, that extra money is gone. So even though you're earning more, it doesn't feel like real progress. And this is where people start getting confused, because they think the problem is income, but it's not. It's structure, because money doesn't organize itself. It just follows whatever pattern already exists. So if your pattern is unplanned, money spreads out into small things you don't even notice. And over time, those small things add up, not in a dramatic way, just enough to slow everything down. So instead of trying to track every little expense, the smarter move is actually much simpler. You control the direction. That's it. And that's what allocation really means. You decide ahead of time where your money is going before spending even starts. Because once you're already in the moment, it's way harder to control decisions. But when things are decided early, everything else just follows that structure. Now I know what you might be thinking. Doesn't that make things restrictive? But honestly, it's the opposite. Because when there's no structure, you're constantly second-guessing yourself. Like, should I buy this? Am I overspending? That mental back and forth gets exhausting. But when your money is already organized, those questions disappear. You already know your limits. And that clarity actually feels freeing once that part is set. The next thing that really matters is saving. And not for the reason most people think. Saving isn't about getting rich. It's about staying stable. It gives you breathing room. Because real life isn't predictable. Things come up. And without some kind of buffer, even a small expense can throw everything off. But when that buffer exists, your reaction changes completely. Something happens, and instead of stressing out, you just handle it. No panic. No resetting everything. You just deal with it and move on. And that's a big shift. Because now your progress doesn't keep getting interrupted. It actually continues. Now, once you've got that stability, this is where things start getting interesting. Because now you can actually think about growth. And that's where investing comes in. Instead of your money just sitting there, it starts working. Now, it's not fast, and it's not supposed to be. But over time, that slow movement starts building into something real. And this is where compounding comes in, which sounds complicated, but it's really not. It just means your growth starts building on itself. So instead of starting over every time, you're stacking progress. At first, it feels slow, like nothing is happening. But if you stick with it, that growth starts picking up, and eventually, it becomes very noticeable. Now, here's the part where a lot of people lose patience. Because when you first start investing, it doesn't feel impressive at all. You check your progress, and it's like barely anything changed. And that's frustrating, because you're doing the right thing, but you're not seeing results yet. So naturally, people start doubting the process. But what's actually happening is this. The system is working, just quietly, and if you stick with it long enough, that quiet growth starts becoming visible. And this is where something more important than money comes in: behavior. Because at the end of the day, money decisions aren't just logical. They're emotional. They're habitual. They're automatic most of the time. You don't sit and calculate every decision. You just act based on what feels normal. And those normal actions are what shape your results over time. So if your habits are all over the place, your results will be too. You might do well for a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months, but then something slips and you're back where you started. And it's not because you don't know what to do. It's because there's no consistency behind it. But once your habits become steady, things start stabilizing. And this is exactly why systems matter more than motivation. Because motivation feels strong in the moment, but it doesn't last. Some days you're focused, other days, not really. And if your progress depends on that feeling, it's always going to be unstable. But a system doesn't care how you feel. It just keeps running. And that's what makes it reliable. Once you have a system in place, something interesting happens. You stop overthinking everything. Decisions get easier because you're not starting from zero every time. You already have a structure guiding you. So instead of asking, what should I do with this money? You already know, and that removes a lot of friction. And when that friction goes away, money starts to feel less stressful. Not because everything is perfect, but because things are clear. You know what's happening. You know where your money is going. And that clarity changes how you think. You stop reacting and start planning. That shift from reacting to planning is actually bigger than it sounds. Because reacting means you're always catching up. Something happens, then you deal with it. But planning puts you ahead. You make decisions before things even begin. And that's where real control comes from. Now, over time, those planned decisions start stacking. And it doesn't feel dramatic. It's not like one big moment where everything changes. It's smaller than that, but consistent. And that consistency is what builds real progress, even when it doesn't feel exciting. And this is something people underestimate. Progress doesn't come from going all in for a short time. It comes from showing up consistently, even when it feels boring, even when nothing seems to be changing, because those repeated actions are what actually move things forward. Now, here's something important to understand. Earning more money won't fix a weak system. It'll just make the same problems bigger. More spending, more leaks, more confusion. But if your system is strong, more income does the opposite. It speeds everything up. It amplifies what's already working. And that's where real progress starts accelerating. So once your system starts working, something subtle begins to change. You stop feeling like money is unpredictable. Before, it probably felt like money just came in and disappeared without much control. But now, you start seeing where everything is going. And that alone makes a big difference. Because when you understand the flow, you naturally start making better decisions without even thinking too much about it. And with that clarity comes a sense of control. Not perfect control, but enough to feel like you're not just reacting anymore. You're deciding, you're directing things. And that shift is important because once you feel even a little bit in control, you start trusting your own decisions more. Now, when that happens, money becomes less stressful. Not because everything is easy, but because things make sense. You're no longer guessing all the time. You're not constantly second-guessing yourself. And that removes a lot of mental pressure. And when stress goes down, your decisions improve because you're no longer acting out of pressure. You're thinking clearly. You're taking your time. And better decisions, even small ones, start stacking in your favor. Now, here's something interesting. Once your system is stable, progress starts feeling smoother, not fast, not dramatic, just steady. And that's actually a good sign, because real progress rarely feels exciting. It just keeps moving forward quietly. At this point, you also become more aware of your choices. Before, things just happen automatically. Now, you start noticing patterns. You see where money goes. You see what works and what doesn't. And that awareness helps you improve without forcing anything. And over time, those small improvements start compounding too. not just your money, but your decisions. You make fewer mistakes. You recover faster. You adjust quicker. And that creates momentum. Now, something else changes here. Your mindset. You stop thinking short-term all the time. You're not just focused on the next expense or the next paycheck. You start thinking in longer timelines. And that changes how you use money completely. Because once you start thinking long-term, you stop making rush decisions. You don't react to every small situation. You zoom out. And when you zoom out, a lot of things that felt important before don't matter as much anymore. And this is where things really start to come together. Because now you're not just managing money. You're understanding it. You see how everything connects. Income, spending, saving, investing. It all makes sense as one system. And once it makes sense, it becomes much easier to stay consistent. At this point in your financial journey, something subtle but very important starts to happen. You stop thinking about money as something emotional. Earlier, every decision probably felt tied to stress, urgency, or pressure, like you had to act fast or miss out. But now that reaction slows down. You start noticing something different, space between thought and action, and that space changes everything. Because when you're not reacting instantly anymore, you finally give yourself time to think clearly. And in money, clarity always beats speed. Most financial mistakes don't happen because people don't know what to do. They happen because they decide too quickly. Once you slow that down, even slightly, your entire financial behavior starts improving naturally. Now, as that clarity grows, you begin to notice patterns in your own behavior. Not in theory, but in real life, you start seeing how certain decisions repeat, how certain spending habits show up again and again. And once you see those patterns clearly, something shifts inside your thinking. Because now, you're no longer confused about what's happening with your money. You understand it. And understanding removes a lot of emotional pressure. Before, money might have felt unpredictable, but now it feels readable. And that readability is what creates real confidence. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing is hidden anymore. Once you reach this stage, your decisions start becoming less emotional and more intentional. And that shift is extremely important. Because earlier, money decisions might have been influenced by the moment, mood, urgency, or pressure. But now, you begin to separate emotion from structure. You don't just ask, can I afford this? You start asking, does this align with my system? That small change in thinking creates a completely different financial outcome over time. Because now, every decision is connected to something bigger than the moment itself. It's connected to direction. And as your structure becomes stronger, something interesting happens with stress. It slowly reduces, not because problems disappear, but because you know how to handle them. That's a big difference. Stress doesn't always come from lack of money. Sometimes it comes from lack of clarity. When you don't know what's happening, even small issues feel big. But when your system is clear, even bigger problems feel manageable because you already know where things stand. And that stability gives you mental space. Now, here's something people often misunderstand. A strong financial system doesn't mean you never spend. It doesn't mean you restrict everything. It simply means your spending has direction. You still enjoy things. You still live your life. But now, it's not random anymore. It's intentional. And that intention changes everything. Because when spending aligns with structure, there's no guilt attached to it. No confusion afterward. Just clarity. As this continues, you start to realize something very powerful. You are no longer just earning money. You are managing a system. And systems behave differently than emotions. Systems are stable. They respond consistently. They don't collapse just because one part changes. So now, even if your income fluctuates a little, your entire financial life doesn't break. Because the structure is doing the heavy lifting. At this stage, growth becomes less about effort and more about direction. You don't need to constantly push. You don't need to constantly fix things. Instead, you focus on staying aligned with the system you built. And that alignment becomes the real skill. Because most people try to force results. But here, you're just maintaining direction. And over time, direction beats intensity. And this is where long-term thinking fully kicks in. You stop measuring success in days or weeks. You start thinking in months, years, because you begin to understand something important. Small decisions repeated over time are what actually build wealth, not sudden moves, not emotional changes, just consistency. And once you accept that, your entire approach becomes calmer. Now, if you zoom out completely, you realize something very simple. Financial success isn't really complicated. It's just structured behavior repeated long enough. That's it. No secret tricks. No hidden formulas. Just understanding how money flows and sticking to a system that supports that flow. Most people overcomplicate it, but the truth is simpler than it looks. So, let's just bring everything together for a moment, because if you followed all of this, you'll notice something important. It was never really about money alone. It was always about structure, about how money moves, how decisions are made, and how your habits quietly shape your entire financial life without you even realizing it. And honestly, most people don't struggle with money because they're lazy or careless. They struggle because no one ever showed them the system behind it. So what happens instead is simple. You grow up, you start earning, and suddenly you're expected to figure everything out on your own. No guide, no framework, no structure, just trial and error. And that's where most of the stress starts. Because when there's no system, every decision feels heavier than it should. Every expense feels like a guess. Every paycheck feels temporary. Every month feels slightly unpredictable. But once you start seeing money as a system, everything changes. Not instantly, not dramatically, but slowly, clearly, quietly. You stop thinking in moments, and you start thinking in patterns. And that shift alone is powerful, because now, instead of reacting to money, you start directing it. You give it structure. You tell it where to go before it even arrives. And when you do that long enough, something interesting happens. Your financial life stops feeling like something that's happening to you and starts feeling like something you're actually managing. And I think that's the real difference most people are looking for, even if they don't realize it. It's not just about having more money. It's about feeling in control of what you already have, because control removes stress, and clarity removes confusion. And once both of those things are in place, you start making better decisions without forcing it. You don't need to overthink every purchase. You don't need to constantly question yourself. You already know your system. You already know your direction. And that's where confidence comes from. Not from earning a certain number, but from understanding how your money behaves. And once you reach that point, something else happens too. You stop chasing quick results, because you realize real progress isn't loud. It's not instant. It doesn't happen in one big moment. It happens in small decisions repeated over time. And those small decisions compound, just like we talked about earlier. Quiet at first, almost invisible, but powerful over time. So if there's one idea I want you to take away from all of this, it's this. Don't focus only on earning more. Focus on building a system that works with whatever you earn, because income will change throughout your life. Sometimes it goes up. Sometimes it slows down. But if your system stays strong, you stay stable through all of it. And that stability is what actually builds long-term progress. Not sudden wins. Not lucky breaks. Just structure, consistency, and time. So whether you're just starting out or you've already been earning for a while, it's never too early or too late to organize your money properly. Because the moment you do, you stop feeling lost in the process, and you start seeing the bigger picture. And once you see the bigger picture, you don't really go back to guessing anymore. You just improve, slowly, steadily, intentionally. And that's really what financial literacy is. Not perfection, not complexity. Just understanding the system well enough to make better decisions going forward. And if you've watched this far, you're already ahead of most people just by thinking this way.